Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of CaneSport's Inside the Lines as we take a look at what's been going on with the Miami Hurricanes over the past week or two, and it's been a lot and quite a bit for us to cover today, so we'll get right to it. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined as always by our managing editor, Matt Shodell, and Matt, it's been a whirlwind the last few weeks. It's the off season, which means the king of the off season, Manny Diaz, has just been racking them up and taking them home, and really just been doing a phenomenal job in taking an introspective look at his football program and attacking problems that a lot of head coaches are not willing to admit that they have, and some of these have involved some tough moves, brutal decisions. I'm sure some relationships might have been a little fractured along the way with some of them and things of that sort. But I think that you would probably agree that what we've emerged with here as we head into February is a football program that is in better shape than it was in December. And I think Manny Diaz has positioned himself to give 2021 his best shot. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely the king of the offseason. Like last offseason, remember everyone wanted to fire him, and then brings in Ed Reed and Rhett Lashley and transfers who panned out really well, and like everyone thought everything was great. And then the season hits again, and everyone's like, "Oh, what happened? The defense is terrible." And now he's trying to fix it again. So it's a shame you can't win a championship in the offseason. I would love to see them have a season like their off seasons. The only move that I don't love is Manny Diaz calling the defense again. Like, I don't think that's necessary. I always am a big fan of a head coach being a head coach and not just being on one side of the ball and having to devote so much energy to that side, although I guess the defensive analyst, Bob Shoop, will help him. But other than that, I like all the moves they've made. I would like to see them, sort of not think their linebacker position is as good as it is, because in my opinion, they probably need 2 linebacker transfers. I'm not sure they're taking any, since at this point it would count against the 2022 class. They do have a tendency to think some of their players are maybe a little better than they actually are. But look, they are making moves, like you said. They're doing something, which is better than nothing. And I do like a lot of the things they've done. Again, just wish they brought in a real defense coordinator, and again, wish they had a linebacker or 2 transfer come in instead of maybe a defensive end who's questionable, a wide receiver who might be really good, but might be just like the other guys they have. He had some drop issues last year, so. I can't complain too much. The offseason is always a time for optimism, so I'll be optimistic for a change.
Well, look, this is not the ideal blueprint for a football program. You don't want to be remaking your coaching staff every offseason. You don't want to have to rely on a whole array of moves to set yourself up for the next year. Let's be honest. I think if we want to keep it real with everybody, you have to acknowledge that this is not the blueprint. Now, that said, this is part of what I call an unavoidable, and it is unavoidable. I don't care what anybody says. When you hire a first-time head football coach that you're expecting to compete at this level of major college football, it is unavoidable to go through what Miami's gone through the last 2 years. Now, the first year obviously was an absolute disaster. They finished 6-7. Everything went wrong. So last year, Manny, he addresses the offensive side of the football, brings in Rhett Lashley. They recruit the Eric King, Justice, Likens, retooled the offensive coaching staff. And I think we saw results. Was Miami one of the top 10 offenses in college football? No, we didn't see results to that degree. There's still plenty of things that can get better, and we'll be looking at some of those things over the next few weeks at CaneSport.com as we start pointing towards spring practice. But I don't think anybody would disagree that there was significant improvement on the offensive side of the ball. Now, on the flip side, things went a little backwards on defense, I thought, and there were times the defense played well. There were times the defense didn't play well. The consistency wasn't there, and everything was exposed when they got to North Carolina. And North Carolina totally undressed them. I thought they took advantage of every weakness the Miami defense had, and obviously put up a record 770 yards total offense, which is totally humiliating. And quite frankly, that's exactly how Manny Diaz should have looked at that performance. And then to have it followed up with just horrendous, for opening segment of the bowl game against Oklahoma State. I think any doubt in his mind as a head coach that he had issues that he must address on defense, we're smacking him right in the face. And to the fan base, that meant we got to fire Blake Baker. But this was never as simple as just firing Blake Baker. As fans, we always want a scapegoat. We always want to point our fingers at one guy. It's always the coordinator's fault. This was not just the coordinator's fault. This was a group effort on defense led by Manny Diaz. They were running Manny Diaz's defense. Manny Diaz had his hands on every single thing that went on that side of the ball, from recruiting to game planning to what went on game day on the field. Yes, Blake Baker was doing the signals, and was the front man for that effort. No argument. But to say, oh, geez, we just got to remove Blake Baker and everything's fixed would have been just absolutely foolish. And to Manny's credit, that's not what happened. All right, so you're sitting there with this contingent of coaches, Matt, and you said that you don't like that Manny's calling the defense. I'm going to come down on the other side of that, and here's why. Manny Diaz is a 20-year defensive coordinator. He got the head coaching job because of his ability to run a defense. And, you have a handful of defensive coordinators out there in college football that I think everybody would say are probably more accomplished than Manny Diaz and might be better defensive coordinators than Manny Diaz. He's not going to go hire those guys. Those guys aren't coming to Miami to work under Manny Diaz because they think they're better than Manny Diaz. And that would be a dynamic that would not work by any stretch of the imagination. So he's sitting there and he had a choice to make. And the first thing he needed to do was improve the personnel. I mean, he's a coach. He's not going to totally blame himself. He thinks he can dial up defense, and he's got to improve the personnel. So he's thinking, I got to get some recruiters in the building because what they were doing wasn't good enough. Yeah, I thought Ephraim Banda in the last year or so just did an absolutely phenomenal job in helping land some of these Dade County kids. But if Miami's going to get to the next level and back to the level that it wants to be at in football, the players are going to have to come from more than Dade County. As much as they want to focus on South Florida, as great as South Florida is, you got to be able to go outside the area and recruit. And they weren't getting it done in that regard. Miami has been a non-player on the national stage for the best players in the country for a very long time in college football. So that has to change. So he had to get some recruiters. So that meant he had to retool his staff to bring as many recruiters as he could in. By calling the defense himself, that frees him up to do that. And we saw him do that yesterday when he hired Travis Williams, who is a young coach who has established his capability to recruit and came from Auburn. So he was able to do that. Before he did that, he was able to go hire Travaris Robinson as his safeties coach, another guy who, even more so than Travis Williams, without question, has established himself as one of the better recruiters in college football, a guy that can get it done on the recruiting trail. They now can recruit not only in Dade County with these two guys, they can recruit outside of Dade County with these two guys. Then you bring a young coach, DVD, in as the cornerbacks coach, who comes at a little lower salary level because you got to pay these other guys, and you're trying to make moves within a budget because you're in a COVID year. And even though I like to say money is not a major issue at Miami anymore, it's a little bit of an issue. Let's be honest, in a COVID year, especially when you're still paying Dan Enos $1 million plus. So firing Blake Baker was not an option. So Manny had to work this whole thing together in one piece. All right. So Banda goes to Utah State as coordinator. That frees up a spot. It's kind of like a win-win. They were going to have to split up eventually anyway. Banda has a lot of ambition as a coach. This gives him a chance. He gets to go and call the shots at Utah State. And that freed up a spot for Manny to go get T-Rob. Awesome move. I don't think anybody would argue that. Okay. So then Manny is sitting there and he still has Blake Baker as his defensive coordinator. And I've stuck up for Blake a little bit. Like, Blake is a good young coach, and I think you're going to see him do well at LSU. But the dynamic with Manny was not going well, and they couldn't fire him because they weren't going to take on another coach's contract, and Blake Baker had one more year left on his contract. Manny announces, I'm going to call the plays on defense. Okay, that was a signal to Blake Baker, like, hey, you should think about this. Maybe it's not going as well as we would like. And, Blake Baker gets the opportunity to go to LSU. He's a Louisiana guy, got great recruiting connections all through the state of Louisiana. He should do a phenomenal job for LSU. So that's a win-win for everybody. Manny makes count. He brings in T. Will from Auburn. Now he's got another young coach who seems to have a really good feel for recruiting, who's very close with T-Rob. They can work together. Those two are going to become like Batman and Robin. We had a story on CaneSport.com talking about how they're going to kill it in South Florida, in the opinion of somebody that has watched T. Will recruit. And I think there's a great chance that that's going to happen. I think they can do a great job, not just in South Florida. I think they can do a great job beyond. Okay, and then I thought the final piece might have been the most significant. And it kind of aligns with what you're saying. A head coach has a lot on his plate. He's got to do the media stuff. He's got to look after the whole program. He's got to deal with behavioral issues. There's a whole lineup of things a head coach has to do. And yeah, while we see a lot of head coaches coordinate the offense or the defense throughout college football, it helps if they have a right-hand guy that they can count on. So what does Manny do? He goes out and gets Bob Shoop, a veteran defensive coordinator, a guy that for 16 years has called the shots himself. And he is going to be invaluable to Manny Diaz as an analyst. He will be able to help him game plan. He will be able to help him scout opponents and things like that. Brings him almost a second defensive coordinator to help him with the defense. So when you put all of this together, Matt, that's why I like it. And I think that Manny, in taking things into his own hands, is doing the best thing for Manny Diaz. Let's face it, he's going to year 3. He hasn't won anything yet. He hasn't come close to winning anything yet. He is under the gun. And I think that taking it into his hands in a way that maybe, like, I think back to Randy Shannon, how he went through 3 defensive coordinators in 4 years, Matt. And I think, what if Randy had just taken the defense himself? So I like the move. And I think when you put this whole team and all these pieces together, that it's an improvement for the Canes without question.
All right, my turn. Well, that was a good Shakespearean soliloquy you had there.
Hey, I tried.
I can't answer. I can't go into all that stuff. I just hope this doesn't.
I got to take a drink of water, though, man. I wore myself out with that one.
Yeah, that's all right. So here's just a couple of thoughts I have. First of all, on the field, I personally think the coaching changes are a wash. I think Mike Rumpf, as an on-field coach, was great. I had no problem with him. He couldn't recruit, but he's a great on-field coach. I do think he taught these kids a lot. DVD's a young guy. He's not, he's not going to be as good an on-field coach as Mike Rumpf. T-Rob will have to coach him along the way. T-Rob's a step up over Ephraim Banda, in my opinion. Inside linebacker coach Travis Williams stepped down from Blake Baker. Not as experienced. He's been at 1 program total. Okay, this is just on the field I'm talking about. And Jess Simpson's been here before, so I don't see that as like this major, amazing hire. I think he's fine. So on-field coaching on the defensive side with the entire staff shakeup, other than Jonathan Patke, I don't think it's a huge step up. Recruiting is a huge step up. And that comes back to why it doesn't matter that Manny Diaz is calling the plays. The level of talent on the team on defense is not where it needs to be. It doesn't matter if you have the greatest coordinator in the world if you don't have the talent. And a problem that nobody talks about that really probably cost Blake Baker his job and caused all sorts of problems among the defensive coaches was Rhett Lashley. Why was it Rhett Lashley? Because his hurry-up spread offense put the defense that had no depth and limited talent at linebacker and at cornerback on the field an inordinate amount of snaps more than it would have in, let's say, 2018 when Manny Diaz's defense did great. Now, will Manny Diaz's defense next year be as good as 2018? No, it won't. Not just because the talent's probably not as good, even with talent-wise, the stats are not going to be as good, even with the exact same talent. Just because they're playing an extra 2 to 3 series a game on defense, you're going to give up yards to good offenses. That's just what happens. Now, the North Carolina game obviously was a one-off. That was ridiculous. That can't happen. But just overall, I'm talking about big picture defense. I don't think Manny Diaz calling plays is going to make that big a difference. I'd rather see him do what I think he does best, which is be a politician, right? Handle fans. Look at the internet. See what fans are saying. Make fans happy. Make the boosters happy. Make the right moves, right? In everyone's opinion. And who knows? It looks like he's doing the right things, but when he gets his head down in the defense every single week, and you and I both know how many hours that takes to prepare to call plays on defense against every offense, week in, week out, that's nonstop for the entire week. These coaches should be sleeping in the office, and many do. He can't be a head coach and do that, So
I mean,
who's running the program when he's in the defensive meeting room for 8 hours a day, studying film 8 hours a day? I mean, who's running the program?
Well, he was doing that anyway. He was doing it anyway. His dad, I think, is obviously a career politician. So Manny, and he's one of the most successful in city of Miami political history. So, Manny, learned well. And yeah, there are times when he is a politician. I agree with you. But if this thing doesn't get straightened out in the next couple of years, I have a hard time imagining that he's going to get extended for another 3
Let me interrupt you. He took the defensive play calling duties, in my opinion, because of all the outside noise. I think that's why he did it. I think fans were demanding a change, and he didn't want it to be at the top. And he immediately made a correction to change fans' perceptions. I will be calling the plays. Look at 2018. I did great. I don't think that was necessarily the right move. I think it didn't have enough thought put into it. I think they could have found a better defense coordinator option and let Manny, again, do what he does best and be the head coach. Like, that's what I want to see.
What if he thinks he's better than anybody he can hire? And he should be. If he's not better than any of these guys he can hire, and Brett Venables isn't coming here. I mean, if he's not better than those guys, then why is he the head football coach? So you could really go either way, I think, with that argument. But at least his fate is in his hands. Like, he's got to win now. And I'm not sure that they don't still have holes on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not sure these new coaches are going to be able to cure all the personnel issues that they might still have over there. And at least if he's going to go down, let him go down on his own merits and his own skills as a coordinator. And I understand what you're saying.
Let me just interrupt you real quick. The reason why he shouldn't have done it, period, is because what he's built right now is great. He's got the right recruiters, like I just mentioned, in place. What he's done by putting himself as defensive coordinator is set himself up to fail, because right now the defensive playing level is not what it needs to be. With a hurry up offense that's going to put that defense on the field too often, everyone's going to blame Diaz. If he had a different coordinator, he could have survived. They need 3 to 4 good years with this staff in place. This is really good recruiting on defense. I'd love to see him add another offensive, really good recruiter, along with Stephen Field. But it's in place right now. They need 3 to 4 years together, and they're not going to get it if this defense is awful this year, and it might not be real good. It's the same defense back with it missing its 2 best players.
Right. So why hire somebody who's not as good as you? Is my point.
That's your scapegoat next year. Get another. You need to get to 3 to 4 years. You need to get to 3 to 4 years.
What does that do for the Canes Nation that wants a representative football team? The people out here are not interested in politics. They're not interested in bullshit. They're not interested in having smoke blown up their butts. They want a winning football program. They want a good team. They want the Canes to be
starting over in 1 or 2 years when your head coach is failing as a defense coordinator, because there's nothing left after that. If he doesn't do well if this defense fails next year or the year after and they lose 3 or 4 or 5 games, God forbid, it's over. It's a nuclear reboot. And it would be a real shame, because I think they're making the right moves. It's just a 3 to 4 year play. And they're not going to get it now that he made himself defensive coordinator if that defense doesn't hold up, and it very well may not.
Well, I think they get at least 2. I don't see any. The season this year would have to really fall apart. And there would have to really be a lot of uproar for them not to get at least 2. And I think you take this year. Hopefully, you can see what kind of recruiting impact. Turn T-Rob and T-Will loose. Don't leave anything in reserve. Use your assets. Get them outside of South Florida. Don't let you don't need T-Rob and T-Will just taking layups in Dade County. I mean, that would be a very poor use of their talents. I think use them in Dade County, but you got to turn them loose out there. In Georgia, Alabama, different places, South Carolina. T-Rob is just in South Carolina. Get them out into the Southeast. Spread your wings recruiting-wise. See if they can upgrade the talent, because the one thing that you are pointing out is that whatever they recruit this year is not. You can't expect true freshmen to walk in and change a football program overnight like that. So, in an ideal scenario, this is a 3 or 4 year now continuation of what's already a 4 or 5 year rebuild that was started by Mark Richt. The rebuilds never end here, unfortunately. But I think it's something that's going to have to be monitored going forward. And if they are bringing in high-level talent, I think that the fans are maybe going to have a little bit of patience. It's just going to be interesting, and I don't think it's something that we can judge right now. I think we have to see how it plays out, see who they can recruit, see if the team gets better, see how Manny calls the defense. Are there more North Carolina disasters, or does the defense look more like it looked in 2017 against Notre Dame and Virginia Tech?
So you didn't think it was a knee-jerk reaction by Manny Diaz when he said, "I'm going to call defensive plays"? When Blake Baker was still on the staff, he could have said to Blake Baker, "Listen, it's not working out," and he could have had a national search for a coordinator. I can see it so clearly, just knowing Manny Diaz and what he's done in the past, that it was a reaction to a really bad end to the season. Take the pressure off. I'm going to take the pressure on myself. This is going to work out great, without really necessarily thinking it through. Like, that's how I view it. And if you don't see it that way, I mean, there's nothing I can say against you. That's exactly.
I think Manny believes that he can be better. He can make it better by taking it on himself. He alluded to the fact that he thought that maybe the players weren't maybe responding as well as they needed to. That if the head coach was taking ownership of the defense, that maybe that he would have their attention more.
Every head coach has.
I don't disagree with you. I'm not buying into that either. I don't disagree with you. It's coach talk to a degree. But I think Manny has a conviction that he is the best defensive coordinator that he can put out there on the field in 2021. That he was not going to hire somebody better than himself. And quite frankly, I can live with that because, like I said, if you're hiring somebody that's better than you, then why are you the head coach? So, we'll see how that one plays out. But I like the moves. I get your reservations. You could definitely debate this from either angle, no doubt about it. I think everyone out there, you guys out there listening, just have to, judge it on your own merits and your own standards and see what you think. But hopefully this is something that works out for Manny and allows him to start moving the program forward because even though the record was better this year, I'm not sure it wasn't propped up by De'Ara King and a few close victories. Miami got the breaks this year that they haven't gotten in other years. Those things kind of even themselves out. I'm not sure that the team, it was really that much better, especially if you take De'Ara King out of the equation, than it's been the last several years. So we'll see what happens this year. Now, all right, so how do you make this year's team better, Matt? And they didn't have the number of spots in the transfer portal that they had a year ago. So they had to be a little bit more selective after and fill in on what they felt they needed after recruiting. And, we've discussed the recruiting class. I think everybody likes it. A lot of good players in the recruiting class. But again, can you rely on true freshmen to change your program? Usually not. So they had to take a look. Where do we need an experienced guy? All right, with Phillips, Roche, and obviously Rousseau before them, all gone at the defensive end position, with Harvey, Cam Williams, Chance Williams, all being unproven talents really right now. The defensive end position looks a little problematic. So they go out and they get a depth filler from Tennessee in DeAndre Johnson. I wasn't a fan of the move, quite frankly. My feeling is if you're going to go into the transfer portal, bring in an impact guy. If you're just covering up for recruiting mistakes that you've made through the years, if Harvey's not good enough, if the Williamses aren't good enough, then you got other problems and that you're just trying to cover up for. I wouldn't have gone and gotten a depth filler. I would have played the guys that I've recruited, but you're not going to object to it either. I mean, all right, so now you got a guy that's played a little college football as a depth filler. Were you okay with the DeAndre Johnson move?
I am, only because he actually has looked pretty good as a pure pass rusher. He was pretty much playing out of position to me at linebacker in terms of what Miami does versus what Tennessee did. And Miami, I mean, you saw that bowl game. They desperately need a pass rusher. So an older veteran pass rusher, yeah, I'll take him in a heartbeat. I mean, they had to get somebody. And you know what? If someone else opens up for summer admission, take them too. I don't, in general, like the idea of transfers just because they take a spot. So, for instance, right now Miami's at 24, including the 21 signees plus the 3 transfers is 24. They had 24 spots in the class of 2021 because they had lost one with all the transfers they took the year before. Normally, you could take 25 kids in a year. If they take anybody else moving forward, it's going to count against a 2022 recruit. In other words, they might only be if they take 5 more transfers, you'd only take 20 kids at most in 2022. And if you didn't even take the full amount in 2022, you can count any early enrollees against 2023. So you could take 28 kids in 2023 if you take 3 less than the 25 in 2022, if everyone follows that. But in this particular COVID-19 world, these rosters are going to be so bloated to over 100 kids in a couple of years. This is like the optimal time to be transfer you. I mean, unless you think you're really going to get 25 top-notch kids in the class of 2022 that like they're all can't miss, I take another 5 transfers. Try to win this year. The schedule looks pretty good. Bama's going to be tough, but you know what? You can still get to the Coastal Championship game fairly easily if you can beat North Carolina. Maybe get lucky against Clemson and you're in the playoffs. This is a year to try and do it. I mean, why not? Because with all these kids coming back and getting the extra years of eligibility and moving forward with all these kids remaining on the rosters for all these years, you know, they're going to end up with like, 50 freshmen or something like that at some point when all these kids report in the summer. Like, you don't need another 25 freshmen in the class of 2022 unless, like I said, they're all can't miss. So this is the year to take more transfers, take a couple linebackers, take another defensive end. If they're out there and they're guys that these coaches think are starters, I would take them this year, period, just because of the COVID numbers. Normally, I would not touch any of them.
Well, the other transfers I like better. I love the Tyreek Stevenson pickup. A cornerback out of South Florida who they tried very hard to get out of high school, that they lost out on to Georgia, decides he wants to come back home, and they're able to get him in the transfer market, and you pencil him right in at a starting quarterback spot. He'll be the best cornerback on the team the second he steps on the practice field. There's no doubt about it. Might have been the best that he left at Georgia. When he left Georgia, might have been the best on that roster. So very weak, what I consider a very weak spot on the team is cornerback. I think Couch is okay. I think Blades is okay. I think Ivy is okay. But I think having a guy that's better than them, and I think Tyreek Stevenson is going to mean the world to this defense that has some holes in other spots. So I love that move a lot. And another one that I thought was really, really interesting was picking up Charleston Rambo at wide receiver from Oklahoma. And, let me pop him up on the screen here while we talk about it. But, I felt that when you're looking at this team, you had 12 wide receivers. And, I mean, you don't need another receiver on face value. However, you have 12 wide receivers, but you don't have a go-to guy and a guy that can really stretch the defense and make, consistent big plays down the field. And when you watch this Rambo guy, when he excelled at Oklahoma, he's a guy, Matt, that I think can unquestionably do that.
Yeah, well, look, I agree with you on Stevenson 100%. With Rambo, there's some question marks. 2 years ago, he was really good as their number 2 receiver. This year, he was supposed to be their number 1 guy. They wound up throwing like a lot of quick slants and, just little short stuff to him. And he's just not a guy who breaks tackles. So I guess maybe they were using him incorrectly. Maybe he got too much attention from defenses and couldn't handle it. I think with Miami's other speed receivers, the Mike Harleys of the world, I think he could be a number 2 option again. I don't see him being like a 1,000-yard receiver at Miami, but I could see him getting 600-700 yards and, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns, having long touchdowns. He's that kind of guy. Not going to break tackles. One guy who covered him up there for his time there was had a really good quote. Said he's not a Batman, he's a Robin. So that tells you what you need to know. I mean, he couldn't be a very good complement. Not going to be your 1,000-yard possession receiver, that's for sure.
When I look at some of these highlights from his time at Oklahoma, and I see some of the plays he made, I think he can be. I don't know about 1,000. I'm not going to throw out a yardage total. But I think he could be a guy that makes a lot of plays in Rhett Lashley's offense. And we're not close enough to Oklahoma to really judge what happened there. And I understand he didn't have as good a season last year as he had the year before. But, you could see that this kid's got some ability. And Lashley is going to use him. I feel pretty confident about that. And, I like the pickup. I think it gives them somebody other than Mike Harley that they can throw the ball to. And then now you got 10 guys or 10, I guess it'll be 10, that'll be competing for one other starting spot and maybe 3 other rotation spots. And I like it a lot. You don't have to, if D. Wiggins and Mark Pope can't step it up, you still have an explosive offense potentially. And, I think that Rambo pickup is going to pay big dividends this fall. So, we'll see what happens. You got a lot of new faces, coaches, a few new players. You got a whole recruiting class coming in. When you sum it all up, Matt, I think you and I will agree that it's going to be an interesting offseason. I hope they have spring practice. I hope we get to see some of it at some point. This has been really a frustrating year, not being able to look at things up close and really have the foundation for opinions and things like that. But they got a lot to work on, and I think they got a lot of pieces coming in that they can get better with.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are, as much as we talk about some issues that we have with the team, there are a lot of positives, and a lot of times you sort of gloss over some of the positives, and you sort of focus on some of the issues they're having, because obviously those things, if they can fix them up, are going to make this team a championship team. And the good news is the things that we are talking about that are the issues, that list is getting smaller than what it used to be. Okay, so when that list gets to nothing, that's where we want to be. One or two small things. There's still some big things out there they got to fix. But it's getting better. It's getting better. It's not where you want it to be, but it's getting better, and that's all you can ask for. If they can take another step up this year, like I said, I still see this a 3 to 4 year process with great recruiting, and they have those guys on the staff now, especially on defense, to do it. I think Miami can really get back to where it was, back in the glory days. People have thrown that around to the we're back thing way too often. Never say that again. But I do think this can be, a team that competes for championships consistently if they can weather these next 2 to 3 years and maybe, get 9 wins, 10 wins, to build. And if you can see that building happening, and we keep seeing those problems getting smaller and smaller every single year, and everything's looking like it's trending in the right direction, fans have got to give this staff a chance. That's the key, because if they lose some bad games this year, what generally gets coaches fired is when fans go crazy and the booster support dries up and the money dries up, and Manny Diaz very well knows that. That's why you see him making some of these, what I call knee-jerk reactions, which to me, the one mistake he made was making himself defense coordinator, like I mentioned, which I thought was a real knee-jerk reaction. But I like a lot of the moves he's made. I do think this team has the potential to be better than last year, especially if De'Ara King is back. Probably not as much of a runner, but even just if he's back in that first game, that'll be a huge boost for that offense. The offense is going to be just as good even without Brevin Jordan to me. The offensive line is going to be better. We didn't talk about the offense at all because most of the focus has been on improving the defense this offseason, and rightfully so. But I do see some positive trends. Like I said, I'm very excited, not just for the spring, but I'm ready to get next season going. Let's go. I'm ready.
Yeah. I think that this is the best coaching staff that Miami's had, potentially. We'll say potentially because they haven't done anything yet. They haven't recruited anybody. They haven't won a game. I think potentially that this is the most complete coaching staff that's been at Miami when you factor in recruiting and game planning, especially with Shoop helping Manny with the defense, with Lashley running the offense, with Likens helping him. They've just got a lot of complementary pieces that can work together. I think it's the best coaching staff that since the initial Larry Coker staff that played for 2 national titles. I really do.
Fans don't want to hear Larry Coker's name when you mention that.
No, but that was a good coaching staff.
Fans don't want to.
I know, but it was good. It was good for a couple of years. Like they went to the national title game twice. Chud left. Egos came into play a little bit. It fell apart, but Larry wasn't really equipped to really be a great head coach, and it kind of slowly came apart at the seams. But that was a good coaching staff initially, and they won big. But fans don't want to hear 3-4 years if there's not results. And I think you hit it right on the head. You got to show improvement. You got to see things getting better. Maybe that doesn't mean beating Clemson in 2021 or 2022. But you got to see the hope that by 2023 you're beating Clemson every now and then, that you're competing for ACC titles, that you're competing to get into the college football playoff, that you're relevant in college football. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a juggling act. This is not the most patient fan base in the world, and they've been asked to deal with a lot for 18 years. And the frustration has been warranted. Any criticism has been warranted, whether it's from the top, whether you're criticizing the top, whether you're listen. This fan base has had to sit through 18 years of this, and with no end in sight. And there's a glimmer of hope here. This is a complete coaching staff. Now we got to see what they're able to do. So, what do you guys out there think about all this? We want to know. We want you to go to the message boards right now. Open up the window and scream and tell us. No, seriously, with your keyboard, go on the message boards. Tell us what you think about some of these subjects, and we'll see you there. And a lot's going to be going on. And so until next time, he's Matt Shodell. I'm Gary Ferman. We thank you for joining us on CaneSport's Inside the Lines. We'll see you next time, everybody.